Okay, so for this graph here, federal surplus as a percentage of gross domestic product, right over here, we could see again the black line zero, meaning a balanced budget. Anything above indicating a surplus, anything below indicating a deficit. So from 1950 to current 2022, these numbers now on the side here represent percentages. So now we're looking at the federal surplus or deficit as a percentage of gross domestic product of GDP. If we go to the nationalpriorities.org glossary, we see GDP, gross domestic product. Gross domestic product is a way of measuring the size of a nation's economy. It's the total value of all final goods and services produced in an economy in a given year. Final means the value of goods and services purchased by the final consumer as opposed to the value of raw materials purchased by a factory. Okay, so pretty much as we can see, GDP is it represents how well the economy is doing in terms of people's incomes and adjusting for inflation. Pretty much the value of each good that America produces. The total sum of that would be gross domestic product. So now, as we can see, the reasons are the same. Like the spike in the surplus in 2000, we can see that it was the surplus as a percentage of GDP was almost 2.3%. And then if we go to the another significant time, the coronavirus pandemic, we could see percentage of the deficit as a percentage of GDP was around almost 15%, 14.9%. And if we go up to today, or actually 2022, we could see last year it was around 5%. The national deficit was around 5% of gross domestic product, GDP. These lines, as we can see, during these areas of expansion, we can notice that there are two ways that these can be interpreted. The expansion periods can be interpreted as either the government either spending less, such as smaller budget, or it also could mean the economy was doing better. So, like as we could see in 1995, 1997, during an expansion period, right before we reached a surplus, we were close to 1996. We were around 1.3% of GDP, and then the economy seemed to be getting better. We were going almost at a surplus. We were at almost 0.2%, and then when we finally reached a surplus in 1998, 0.7%, and it kept going up and up. So government could be spending less, but it also could mean that the economy is doing better, because we could see as a percentage of gross domestic product, the surplus represented around 1.3% of the GDP. And at the height in 2000, percentage of gross domestic product was 2.3%. So we can compare that. When we take the expansion periods of the 90s and compare it with the periods immediately following recessions. As we know, when recessions hit, government spending increases, such as for safety net programs, such as with COVID-19, with stimulus packages, and like the recession here, the 2008 housing crisis, the Great Recession, that government spending increases. And also that with recessions, that means the economy is suffering, such as job losses, low productivity, increasing safety net programs like welfare and unemployment checks. So all of these contribute to the deficit, and all of these also show they coincide with the health of the economy. As opposed to expansion periods, we can kind of assume that as government spending is decreasing, we can kind of assume that maybe they're not needing as much to spend for safety net programs like welfare and stimulus checks. The economy is doing better. More people are working. More people are contributing to the economy, and as well as government revenues. So clearly, as the economy improves, so does the government revenues because more people are working. So here we can see it's a clear cut example. Gross domestic product surplus and deficit as a percentage of gross domestic product, we can see how the health of the economy and whether or not it's doing well or if it's in a recession, how this impacts government revenues and whether or not and how it affects surpluses and deficits.